So, hi everybody, and welcome to our Ask Me Anything session with Christopher Weed, multi-preneur extraordinaire. How are you doing, Christopher?
I'm great, thank you. I'm very happy to be here with you, Gayle.
Fantastic. I am so glad that you're here too. Oh, Ralph is in. Ralph is joining us. Um, so, we'll give a couple of seconds for that. And then I kind of wanted to start out with just kind of going over a little bit about like your progression because you started really young, 10 years old as a children's magician doing
Right.
magic shows at birthday parties, and then went through the traditional route of graduate from high school, go to college, even got an MBA. But really what ended up being your life's career path, if you will, is still that joy of your childhood. Let's do this. It's going to be fun
I think
stuff.
that's exactly, it's interesting you put it that way because that's exactly what I do. I get to every day do the stuff that every kid sort of dreams of doing,
Mhm.
but I, as an adult, have managed to make those things into businesses, and it's a pretty cool way to live my life. As we do this, out parked in front of my house is one of my fire trucks, because
Nice.
as soon as I'm done with this interview, I'm hopping on it to go to a birthday party. And that's sort of a typical day, which for a normal person might be like, wow, that's kind of an unusual life. But for me, that's every day. And I
Yeah.
love it.
Yeah, and who wouldn't? I mean, thinking about it right now, I want to go. I'll
I'll
meet
take
you,
you along
Josie.
anytime you want, Gail. We can go for a ride.
That would be awesome. One of these days, I think I'm going to take you up on that and maybe do some Facebook lives from some of your events. Going, this is
We love
just
that.
insanely wonderful. Hey, Ralph, how are you doing today?
Hi, Ralph.
Hi, it's Tuesday.
The second Monday this week. Um,
Yeah, no, I'm good.
I'm
How are
glad
you
you could
guys?
join us. Fantastic, fantastic. So happy to be doing this and getting things under momentum going forward. Um, let me, let me bring you up to speed, Ralph. We were just talking a little bit about how Christopher's life path. He started out as a children's magician at the age of 10, and did the traditional schooling, but then his adult career path, except for that first, 5 years where you were discovering that you really didn't want to be in dental sales, um, uh, became just a matter of having fun and having the joy of a child in all of the other multipreneurial efforts that he's done. So when we were talking, Ralph and I were talking yesterday, and one of the things that I know that Ralph is really kind of looking to develop in himself is something that I think that you can help him with quite a bit, because he's at the stage of his new business where he's thinking in terms of what can I provide for people. And when we were talking in your interview, Christopher, you were talking a lot about how you would get into the mindset of what a kid would find entertaining and what a kid would find fun. So, what kind of advice would you have for Ralph to shift that thinking from what he can provide into what his niche wants from him?
Well, okay, so I'm intentionally not going to ask what sort of business you're thinking about because I think that might sort of pollute my answer, if it will. I've always thought there's two paths that I've considered when I approach a new business opportunity. And since we last spoke a few weeks ago, yet another new business opportunity is presented
Gosh,
itself.
you're up to 11 now?
I think we're at 11 now,
Yeah.
and I'm going to answer the question in the context of that because it's the perfect illustration. So I think there's two ways to go about this. I think either A, you come up with something that is so totally unique, that's got a really specific need that people go, wow, I need this product. Like this is the coolest thing ever. I've got to have this. It's something unique. It's really catchy. It's amazing, and it serves a need that maybe people didn't even know they had, or it's for a lot of my businesses, a lot of the businesses are not the type of thing that people Google because they don't even know it exists unless I get it out there through social media and through visibility at events and things like that. I think the other path is it's something that everybody needs and looks for. For example, let's say you're in the carpet cleaning business. Everybody at some point needs their carpet cleaned. Everybody needs their oil changed at some point. Everybody eats, right? I mean, you've got to eat 2 or 3 times a day. Everybody eventually needs tires for their car. Everybody eventually needs to go buy a pair of shoes. So, I think in a lot of cases, you have to decide which of those categories you want to be in. For example, the new business that we're pretty close to launching is a coffee shop in a very high traffic place, where the present coffee shop was a national chain, and the location didn't fit their model moving forward, but it's very successful. And we would come in with a really unique theme for this and some really unique angles. And my approach with that is well, people are there at this venue and they're thirsty, and it's a busy place, and there's literally nowhere to get a coffee there. So I think that's an example of something that, a lot of people like to have coffee every day. And maybe we'll give our unique twist, but it's not like I'm really reinventing the wheel. I mean, a coffee shop is hardly a new idea, whereas a fire truck party or a foam party or a sleepover party or one of the other things that we offer sort of is a unique thing. So I think, Ralph, my advice to you is figure out which path you're on. And the other thing is, and I think this is more broad than just what I'm saying to Ralph right now, is, I think that you've got to be brave. To anybody out there that's watching this who's got a quote unquote real job right now, where you get up every morning and you put on your khakis, well, maybe not in coronavirus, but you get the idea. And you get in your car and you drive 20, 30, 40 minutes to some office building, and you go in and you sit in a cubicle or an office and you put in your 8 or 9 hours, and then you go home and tomorrow you do it again and again and again. I realize that security for a lot of people, having a 401k and having health insurance and having a paycheck every 2 weeks and paid vacation. Yeah, I mean, some people are wired for that because that's, they're very happy with that structure and that stability and that guaranteed money for 2 weeks. But at some point, some people, I think, feel that that's a bit of a soul-sucking situation, and they're not really benefiting themselves, they're benefiting their employer. And at some point, I think that if you have this dream of doing your own thing, of starting your own business, I cannot encourage people enough to have the courage to make that transition. And maybe that means, you do something nights and weekends while you've still got the security of that regular job. Mm-hmm. Maybe it means you make sure your spouse's career is in that stable place so that you can be the one that takes that risk. But, if you look at every great entrepreneur of our day and of generations past, those are people that took big risks and they really rolled the dice. And it isn't necessarily just about money. Sometimes it's just about that personal satisfaction or the lifestyle change that really provides you a level of fulfillment that is far beyond whatever is in your bank account. It's passion,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. As you're talking about that, I'm reminded of J.K. Rowling, that when she first started writing the Harry Potter series, she was a single mom on welfare, taking care of her kids, and had the time to write, but she just wanted to write something that she wouldn't mind reading. And that's where the passion comes in on that. And wow, 20, 30 years later, it's now, its star has burnt out, so to speak, but its trajectory was just phenomenal. Movies and best-selling, all of the books were bestsellers and all of that. And it came out of that little seed of, I enjoy doing this. Let me do this.
That's how I think. Every one of my businesses, I can see myself as being the target customer for what I'm selling. I really, and maybe it's to the point now where after so many years of this, that almost is even blurred in my head. I'm not a mom in her early 30s, obviously, but I sure know how to think like that customer. And I know where they live. I know what they drive. I know what their day is like. I understand, their needs. and I'm almost just automatically focused towards that without even really thinking about it anymore. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But I guess the same is true. If I was, let's say, a dentist, for example, I'm sure that dentist who's been, practicing dentistry for 15 or 20 years probably doesn't a lot of times even have to constantly think about putting a filling in somebody's tooth or pulling a tooth or taking an x-ray. It's just so wired for them at that point that they do their job. And I think I'm much that same way. I've just really gotten to the point where everything I do is very focused towards a certain type of, customer and environment. I understand those customers well. And what I introduce to the market responds really well because I know what to do at this point.
Yeah.
That took a while. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not automatic.
Yeah, I think they call that muscle memory, even when it's associated with the brain, right?
Very much so.
Surgeons, learn how to do these small, teeny tiny stitches and sutures and those types of things with, without being able to look. They've got to pass a test where they can do it without being able to look, where they've practiced enough that their fingers do the right thing. And I think that's exactly what you've honed in on there, Christopher, with that, is that you practice stepping into their shoes enough that you just slip there after a while.
And that takes, so at this point, even when I launch something new, so right now we've got a couple of new things that we're in the process of launching, one of which is my portable miniature golf course business. And yesterday I was loading that miniature golf course up on a trailer and I was hauling it to 2 shopping centers where we're doing events for the next 9 weekends. And as we're loading and unloading it, I was saying to my helper, like, even this process of how you roll this cart onto a trailer and strap it down, we will be better at in 6 months. We'll be faster, we'll be smoother, we'll have some sort of a trick. And I think it takes me, even at this point where I know my market, I'm very zeroed in on what we're doing, it takes me about a year when I launch something new to really get to the point where I feel like I've perfected it. It's smooth, it functions the right way. A website goes through a couple of revisions during that time. We maybe change our pricing, a couple of times, maybe change the way we're packaging things a couple of times. There's always revisions, and I'm totally like approach something with the idea that what I'm starting with today on day one is not going to be what I have 365 days from now, but at least on day one, I have a pretty good hunch of what is probably going to work. And I think that, you don't be afraid to make changes, to fail. I was a part of a Zoom thing yesterday with a bunch of magicians. And one of the things we were talking about was logos. And we discovered as a group that the psychology of a lot of people is that they're always afraid to change their logo. So like, good is good enough, but they settle, but they don't go for great. It's like, well, my logo's good enough. It's okay, and because I have to reprint my business cards or I have to change my website. If you can, marginally improve your business by improving your brand with a better logo, do it. Do it. Don't be afraid to make these incremental changes. Don't be stuck with a crappy logo, or if your website is crappy, it's not hard to redo a website. Don't accept mediocrity. Keep, pushing to make it better and better, because that's going to affect your business in a positive way, in ways you maybe don't even understand.
And I want to tag on to that also. Don't get into overwhelm where you're looking at your logo and you're going, "Oh, I could improve this a little bit, but that means I have to redo everything." Right? You don't have to redo everything. You can put a little shine on one little thing and it can brighten everything else.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think, speaking of logos, by the way, for anybody who watches this now or later, I think that's one of the most critical things if you're going to start a new business, is spend $300 to $500 with a graphic designer, not somebody you find on Fiverr, not somebody who's your neighbor who maybe knows how to operate Photoshop, somebody who actually does logos for a living. And step one when you start any business is spend the effort and the money to get a good logo, because it so is the halo that's over your brand. And you don't even realize, people look at your business card or your website and go, oh, that's kind of a crappy logo, or that's sort of a so-so logo. I bet their company is sort of so-so. Like, there's a lot of people out there that especially like who think like me, that, man, you pick up on the quality of a brand and how it reflects on the quality of the goods or services they offer from the very second you interact with that company.
Yeah. And it's one of the things that I think you've hit the nail on the head and people don't realize is that a logo is an image. It's an icon, it's a symbol, it's a picture. It speaks directly to the audience's subconscious. So if you're not pinging the right message to them, it's not going to land the way that you want it to. So it is like one of the most important branding elements of whatever project that you're doing, whatever business that you're doing, because it communicates in a way that can't be spoken in words.
I think the other thing that a lot of small business owners overlook is actually upstairs here in my house. I have a closet full of branded clothing for every one of my companies. Like, for example, I'm wearing a fantastic fire department t-shirt right now because I'm going to go do a fire truck party after this. But I set up all my logos with a good quality embroidery company, and we have jackets, we have sweatshirts, we have t-shirts, we have polo shirts. Whenever my team or I do anything at an event, we look good and we carry that brand through what we do. And it's as simple as you go into McDonald's and everybody is in a uniform, right? Mm-hmm. If somebody's going to come clean the carpets in my house, a good example of a service, different service than I offer, but it's still a service business. If those guys show up at my front door, like Stanley Steamer, for example, company with a good brand, they're in a shirt that's got the company logo, they've got a name tag on, they've got the proper uniform pants, not some ripped jeans. You don't maybe immediately think, wow, like that's a nice uniform. But even customers that don't think on that level, it improves the perception of the quality of the service experience where they go, wow, this was a really professional experience. And I think there's no business, including my own, where you can't constantly be reevaluating how things look, how your crew looks, how they interact with people, to where you think, all right, I can maybe step this up. And it's even a matter of like the shirts fit correctly. It's little details like that. But I'm all about just that brand just drips from everything to create that experience for people.
Ralph, do you have any questions? I feel like we're talking at you here.
I was just waiting. So I guess what I'm trying to do is, I was recommended to write an ebook about like an unassuming leader because Rob, me and Gayle knows Rob, Dr. Rob. I've reached the top of the enlisted force with being unassuming, and he wanted me to write an ebook about that. And I brought up, I noticed in your video, you said you dealt with foreign countries, and what I wanted to do was target, some of my culture and some of the Asian cultures, because they have like a submissive behavior, and they just don't try to stand out, but there's still a way for them to be leaders. You know what I mean? And Dr. Rob asked me to do a ebook about that, since I reached the top of these levels and I work for the federal government and I'm a GS-12. I've had a lot of leadership positions, but I never was like the outgoing one. I was always an introvert. I was always quiet, and I would just let my work speak for itself.
Here's why I think you should do that. And it's probably not for the reason that maybe he suggested it. So I've written 2 books at this point. And for me, and I'm getting ready to write a 3rd here in the next couple of weeks. And the process of doing that was absolutely the most amazing, like mental and emotional thing for me, because it really forced me to do a lot of thinking and go through a process. So it doesn't really matter what you write about or even what happens to the final product. I think that process of going through that is so like, it's enlightening. It really gets all your neurons firing. And the 2 books I've written so far, I go back about every 3 months and I reread them and remind myself of some of my own ideas. It's crazy how like I read them and I go, wow, that's actually a really good idea. I'd like to expand on that. So I think yes, but even if you don't do anything with it, that is going to be such an intellectually valuable process to you that you have no idea how great it's going to make you feel and how alive it's going to make you feel. Gail, do you agree? I think you've written a couple books,
Absolutely.
Gail.
I've written a couple of books. Actually, of my own, none have been published, but I've been published in a couple of compilation books. But yeah, when I wrote "Man, I Love My Life," it was a journey of going from prior to 8 years old, having, what anybody would think was a normal childhood, to having my family literally break apart, get kidnapped, be abused, all this kind of stuff. And then my putting myself back together. And I learned so much about my own strength and resiliency during that process, that, like Christopher says, it really doesn't matter what it is that you're writing about. The writing process allows you to take a really deep look into things that have been valuable to you or could be valuable to others, that will give you like a well to draw from as you're coaching introverts to become leaders in your practice. Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it. I mean, I'm almost done writing it. It's just finding the design for the book. It's just a 3,500 words um, ebook, but I've noticed that I went back to the stories where I did come out of my shell. I did have to stand up to leadership. Um, it was to the point where I was not afraid to lose my stripes from my guys, but I only did it when I had to.
I think one of the things that is most valuable about your experience, specifically to that, is introvert does not mean coward. Introvert does not mean that you don't have the strength to deliver when it needs to be done. And that's your form of leadership. It's very quiet until the lion needs to roar, and then the lion does his thing and walks back to his lair. you know.
You're right. Over the years, I've, when I was in, had a real job, I think back to different people that worked for me and people I worked for, and their different personalities and their different approaches to leadership and things like that. And I had a couple of bosses that were introverted, and I love them. And I had a couple that were just the opposite of that and were very, maybe even beyond extroverted in the case of one particular entrepreneur I worked for. and they were all equally effective, but just they went about it in completely different ways, and it still arrived at a good endpoint. But both were totally great.
Yeah. Yeah, I think honestly, if we're tightening up niches, and this is just my opinion, but I think that you really could serve the introverts who are not stepping into their leadership because they're afraid of the consequences. And you've got opportunities to show them from your own experience where you're an introvert, but that doesn't mean that you can't stand up for what's right when it's necessary. Okay?
Yeah, wow. Just looking back at it, it's like, you're right. I go back into my den, after everything's all settled. But I guess my question is, like, once I get done with it, how would I market it? Like, because I do want to translate it into Tagalog, Korean, Japanese, to the countries I've been in, where I observed their behavior was just a little different. I guess because I was born in America, I have a different mentality, right? But I still have my culture, and sometimes I want to see my culture just kind of just show themselves more.
Well, I have a suggestion for that. So the way that I have sold the majority of my books is not through like Amazon or anything like that. I haven't have it listed there. is pretty much most of my stuff has been lecture driven. So for example, if I've written a book that's aimed at performers, like one of the books is basically for magicians, ventriloquists, clowns, face painters, balloon twisters, that community. So what I've done is I've booked myself a tour basically, where either I go to their annual conventions and I give a lecture for an hour and I talk about my thing and then I sell the book afterwards, or I have done meetings. For example, I would bet that probably in most communities around the United States, there's probably a Filipino association in most of those communities. So you would be a really interesting guest speaker where you go to Tucson or you go to Las Vegas or LA or Chicago or whatever, and you're that month's guest speaker for their social hour, their meeting or whatever, and you give the talk and you sell the book afterwards. To me, that's probably a more targeted approach than just putting it on Amazon or something, which may work. I don't have an experience there, but I think that also gives you, again, it's a higher level of emotional fulfillment because every time you give that talk, it makes you think even more. You get more into it, and I think it's just more interesting that way because you're having value by being able to talk to people, not just sell the book. So that's what I would consider doing.
That sounds like a great idea.
Oh.
And
Yeah, because I guess
I was just going to say, Christopher is very smart not to list his book on Amazon. The Amazon cut for what the author gets on a book is extremely paltry. There are, everybody wants to go to Amazon because it can be seen all over the world. But, I'd rather sell 5 books in a lecture and make 20 times more than I would have made on 100 books through Amazon.
Like if I go to a really good gathering of my target market and I've got 100, 200, 300 people there, I can sell $1,000, $2,000 easily in books, after the lecture. So I think that's certainly possible. The other thing is, we live in, coronavirus, I think when we do a post-mortem on coronavirus, when it's all over and look back, I think there are actually some really positive things that came out of the last 9 or 10 months. Uh-huh. One of which is I think it really has made online community stronger. So I think that, it may well be that there's an online community there that you can target, whether it's a Facebook group, whether there's some sort of an organization that's national or international that has, some sort of a forum. I think there's some channels there that you can pursue where you become known as an author or as an expert, as somebody who has an authority on a subject. And that's the other advantage we didn't mention about you writing a book is all of a sudden now you're a guy with a book, right? So you're bookable as a lecturer, as a speaker, as a keynote address for events that are related to either the subject at hand or that cultural group. And all of a sudden now you're elevated. And Gayle knows the value of this.
Oh, yeah.
It's this whole notion of elevating, your stature as sort of an expert and an author, and it works. It so totally works. To say I've written a book or two, even if it's never been, published by Random House or Simon and Schuster or whatever, it still gives you tremendous authority.
Yeah,
it builds your brand.
And it's so hard to get booked as a speaker if you don't have a book. It really is. Any of the larger organizations that are paying for you to come and speak to their audience, if you don't have a book, they're not interested. So, I just wanted to add that in there because that was one of the things in my early days as a speaker, talking about recovering from my childhood, that was a stopper for me in getting way out there as a speaker, is that I hadn't finished my book yet. So just know that that's part of the piece for getting booked. Now, the other part of that is you don't necessarily have to wait until we've got coronavirus packed in the can. You can start reaching out to Filipino centers around the country and find out if they've shifted their monthly meeting to virtual.
Yes.
For example, I was looking the other day, NA, almost all of their meetings have become virtual because the first thing you do at an NA meeting is walk in and hug everybody, right? So they've become all virtual. So there are a lot of companies we've seen in Success Engineers. There's a guy that trains nonprofits on how to raise money, and he used to do all of these major events. He's completely pivoted to virtual, so you can actually start reaching out now, and find these places and start saying, I'll show up for a virtual event, no problem. Can I speak to your people? I've got this book. You can order it this way, and start the momentum for it even before coronavirus is declared dead, and we can start hugging each other again. You know. Now, one of the things, if I may, one of the things that I really wanted Christopher to talk about in this Ask Me Anything is his process for launching. Because in every company that he's done, he's got most of the development work done, and systemized in such a way that the launch itself has legs and the brand takes off running. So will you share, as much as you can of
Yeah.
that systemized process, Christopher?
Well, I think, first of all, I think your idea does not necessarily have to be an original idea. It doesn't have to be an original idea. However, that doesn't mean that you can't improve on something. I'll use the fire truck business as an example. I don't know if we told this story, we talked a few weeks ago, so if I'm repeating myself, tell me if this sounds familiar. But I was the fire truck business. I was a children's magician, and I was always searching for new ideas beyond just being able to do a magic show, because there's a lot of magicians in town. I was like, all right, I got to do something that's unique. And I was having lunch at a Subway near Disneyland one day. This was in spring of 2009, and I back in the day when we used to have print publications, you'd always go into places like libraries and restaurants, and they'd have a rack by the front door of free publications, like the New Times, for example, is one here in Phoenix that's published under different names around the country. And they had a rack there with a magazine called OC Parent, Orange County Parent Magazine. And I always would grab magazines like that when I was in other cities traveling around, because I wanted to be able to look at those publications blindly. Because if I look at the one here in Phoenix that I'm an advertiser in and I know everybody, I'm biased as I look at people's ads and their marketing. So when I look at that in another city where I'm not in there and I know nobody, the concepts and the ads and the design of concepts as they're marketing to moms really jumps out at me if it's good. So I'm flipping through this magazine, and I still have this magazine in my file folder upstairs. And I get to the back, and here's this terrible ad. It's business card size. It has got a bad logo. It's badly written. And it basically says, rent a fire truck for your kid's birthday party. And I looked at that and I was like, holy cow, that's a really interesting idea. And I filed it away for a few days. And then I started thinking about it again. And then the sort of obsession began with this idea. So can you buy a fire truck? What does it cost? Where can you buy a fire truck? Well, here's a fire truck that's $500,000. Here's one that's $5,000. Here's one that's $800,000. What do I need? How do I insure it? Where do I store it? What do I need to be able to drive it? Oh, I have to get a commercial driver's license. How do I do that? Oh, the insurance company I work with won't insure it. Well, how do I find an insurance company? All right, I need to store it. Well, the truck has to be this big. I need a door that's this size. You start thinking through all these things. And that whole business came together from the time I saw that ad until I actually had a fire truck sitting in my driveway, 5 months. 5 months, basically. And then, of course, as I'm waiting for the truck to be shipped from the East Coast, I'm doing branding. Well, I can't do the photos since I don't have the truck. So you start sequencing these things in terms of what you can knock out. And the process came together. That was the first major launch that was my own business. I'd done a lot of products and other businesses that I was hired to do, either as a consultant or as an employee before that. But it's for me, like, that's a 24-hour day thing. Once I get my brain going around this, the coffee shop business right now, for example, I'm that way about. I've got a notepad over here, and we're working on the branding right now. So I keep coming up with ideas and parts of words, and I'll be watching TV or I'll be on Facebook or reading a newspaper article. I'm like, oh, that's an interesting, write it down, write it down, write it down. And it hasn't all sort of baked yet, but it's in the oven right now. And I don't know exactly when the timer is going to go ding and we're going to pull it out, but it may be this afternoon. I'm driving in the car and I go, oh, that's like that's it, like it all fits. So but for some people that process may be years in the making. You may have an idea, man, it's my dream to open a store that sells homemade candles or handmade soap or whatever your thing is. It's okay to let that dream sort of percolate for years. The process doesn't need to happen automatically. And over the course of a year or 2 or 3 or 5, whatever it is, accumulate things. You go, okay, this is the name. You acquire the domain name. Okay, it's $10 a year to buy a domain, whatever. All right, in a few months, you put together a logo. Then you start thinking about what your product line is going to be. And then one day you're in the car and you drive by a store that happens to be empty and you go, that would be the perfect store for me to put this concept into. And it may be that takes a long time, and that's totally okay. One thing I think that's really overlooked by a lot of people in that process is really educate yourself on intellectual property. If you're going to open, again, we'll use coffee shop as an example. There's probably 100,000 coffee shops in the United States. So the idea of you coming up with a unique name for your brand is not particularly easy, because there's probably 99,000 other people that have considered that as a name for their coffee shop. So learn about intellectual property, educate yourself how to do a trademark search. If you're considering a name, start Googling that name and see if it pops up anywhere else, see if it's a trademark, see if there's already a company with that name that's got a Facebook page. Because if you really want to launch a brand well, and you want to be in that first position for the intellectual property for your brand, we don't want to be, the ABC coffee shop, Arizona, and there's one in California, and there's one in Texas, and there's one in Michigan, and then you discover somebody has licensed that or trademarked that brand. So I think that's one thing I'd recommend anybody who's wanting to start a business is educate yourself on intellectual property, because potentially that's a big problem down the road. If you don't understand that and you make a mistake, you could invest a lot of effort in launching a business and then get a letter one day from somebody's attorney that could be a $10,000 or $20,000 mistake on your part.
Yeah. Did you ever see the movie Coming to America with Eddie Murphy?
Yeah, way back.
McDowell's Burgers, yeah.
Way back, yeah. Exactly. Exactly. So, learn that. And that's not hard. The wonderful thing about the world we live in today is that there's anything you want to learn about, it's at your fingers. You just, there's good quality information. Sometimes there's not good quality information, but generally speaking, with a little bit of common sense and a little bit of digging, you can get good quality information on nearly any subject to help educate yourself on what you want to do. I know nothing about operating a coffee shop, but I'm learning, and I have a person who does happen to know a lot about it, who's part of our team. So no problem. That doesn't scare me,
Yep. Awesome. Do you have any other questions, Ralph?
Yeah, just one more. Sorry, Chris.
As many as you like. We've got till 2 o'clock.
So, okay, so that's just one aspect, right? And I'm like, oh, this guy's doing multiple things. So, I also write resumes for people, and had a good success rate of getting people into the government. Because it's a different type of resume you have to write when they want to get into the federal government. But I also do it for private sector. And I just started my YouTube channel talking about military transition to civilian life, military experiences. If you experience this, do this. And people just said, just start, right? I mean, how do you separate everything that you're doing?
It's crazy. But I'm real ADD, ADHD. So it actually works, because I naturally, even with all these businesses going in this direction and this direction and this direction and this direction, at like every 5 minutes, For me to even be able to sit for an hour to do this requires tremendous amount of emotional and intellectual, like I really have to focus to this. But I turn what is perceived as a weakness by some people in our society into my superpower, right? Like I've turned that into my superpower, which really works well for me. Now, you mentioned resumes at first, and you struck very close to my heart in a great way with that. Because when I was in grad school at Thunderbird, I was the resume guy in the Career Services Center. And I got really good at writing resumes and like nailing those bullet points and making somebody that had a job, at McDonald's, look like they had a lot of amazing life skills that came from it and stuff like that. And still, I mean, just even yesterday, one of my friends reached out to me. He says, "Oh, here's my resume. Will you look at it?" And I'm really good at writing resumes and I love doing it. Like, that's fun for me. So that, Ralph, is a business, and a really, really great business, because there are always people looking for help with resumes. What I find, though, is a lot of times when they want help with a resume, it isn't that they're planning to look for a job, it's that a job opportunity came up and they need a resume tomorrow morning. So I think that's actually a business. If I were you, and you do it virtually, you don't need to, your market doesn't need to be limited to your community. I think that actually somebody with a really good website that talked about resumes, and if your specialty is resumes for government jobs and that's what you're good at, that's a big enough specialty that there are enough people looking for government jobs out there that I think there's value there. I think there's huge value there. I really like this idea, actually, as it develops in my head. So I think what you do is I think you put yourself together a nice website that talks about how you're the resume guy. I think you definitely need some search engine dominance there, whether you buy your way into that or design your way into that. I mean, maybe it's worth your while if you're going to sell a consulting service to somebody for X number of dollars to help them with a resume per hour, or X dollars to build the resume for them, or whatever it is. Maybe it's even worth your while buying AdWords for that. I think you back that with a blog, because the blog helps with a lot of your SEO. Back that with a blog that you regularly contribute to, where you give tips and ideas. And basically you establish yourself as the expert guy. YouTube channel comes into that as well. You're the expert guy that is the government resume writing guy. And you have a lot of content that's of value that you provide on your site and your YouTube channel and stuff like that. But the real nugget there is that for X number of dollars, they can have you, the expert, that you've established your expertise using those aspects of that site I just described. For X number of dollars, you can have a consultation with the person, or you'll write the resume. X number of dollars, you'll look at their existing resume and pop it up a little bit for them. I think that's a totally marketable thing. Like, that is a really great service that I would totally pay somebody to do. Because let's face it, let's say your fee is, I don't know, let's pick a number. Let's say $200 or $300 to do that for a resume. If I'm trying to apply for a job, man, a couple $100 is absolutely a reasonable investment for, a smart person to make. My friend I was helping the resume with last night, he's applying for a job in video production, right? And he has the job description, and the job description has some very, specific bullet points. They want this, they want this, they want this. And the first advice I gave him was, look at every one of those bullet points and make sure that your resume specifically addresses that you have each of those things that the bullet points are looking for, because that's exactly what the hiring manager is going to do when they sit down. I think of when I used to hire people, I get a stack of, back in the day, actually a stack, physical paper of, 100, 200 resumes, and you're going through those, you're looking at them. And if they're not hitting the button for me, it goes into the can, but man, that's a great idea. Like, the government resume job, writing guy, that's a thing that I think has value, and it's unique. You can serve people all over the country. You can really dominate, the internet with that. Dude, I would pursue that. No question about it. I think there's a real thing there. And the best part about it is that it's not like it's a full-time job right away. You sort of start, working your way into it. I heard an interesting story the other day that reminds me of this, actually. There's a guy that's pretty famous who's got a travel blog. He's called The Points Guy. He's got a lot of Facebook followers. And he's a guy that about, I think, 10, 12 years ago, developed this skill set in how to maximize points from frequent flyer programs, frequent guest programs, credit cards that have all these various rewards. And he started writing a blog about this. Well, he's now got like 30 people working for him. And he sold the company for millions of dollars to some big conglomerate. And what they do is they write about basically how to maximize your points with travel. And this is precisely the same thing with you, Ralph. You know, he started this while he had a 9-to-5 job. This is something you could very easily do as an evening and weekend thing, supplement your income. And if it becomes a big thing when you're ready to retire in a nice government retirement, you know, you then do this when you're in your retirement. Dude, go for it. I cannot tell you how great of an idea I think this is.
I want to actually piggyback on that too, because you're already doing the YouTube channel giving advice for transitioning out of the military. So I'm as excited as Christopher about the idea of you being the federal resume guy. But I think that you can play both sides of it as well if you wanted to, because you can get people into federal government jobs, and then you can also help people that are in federal government jobs transition to private sector, right? So you could actually serve them coming and going, right?
Yeah.
And that book is specifically, you know, supports all of it, because especially with the ones that are getting out, you know, how do you transfer those skills that you learned in the military as an introvert into leadership in the civil sector? And coming in, how do you transfer that I'm not so sure about the world introvert to becoming a confident military tool? Forgive my language on that, but you know, where you're of service to the military, you're doing the job that needs to be done, and you're standing up when needed to stand up, right? I think it all will work really well together, much like Christopher's magic and bubble empire.
And Ralph, I mean, I have just met you, you know, 45 minutes ago, and I already like in just hearing a little bit about your background, you already have the authority to be able to be an expert in this area as like the government, you know, the government resume guy, because it's your life. You know what I mean? And you said, well, I'm not familiar with the government terminology, so pardon me. You said you were like a level 12G or whatever it is. I think in the federal government that relates to how you work your way up. Is that right? Am I on the right track?
Yeah.
So to a government person, that's like pulling out your ID and going, I'm the guy. You know, I'm like that. That holds a lot of weight with somebody that either wants a government job or is a government worker, right? Like that's a really meaningful thing to them, right?
Yeah, it's I've trained the Navy fleet with the program I used to be in. They used to send me all over the world to go train these people on our equipment, our missiles. And some of the officers were like, no, call me by my first name. I'm like, no, you earned it. I'm going to call you by your military rank and your last name. No. But because they knew how high I was, they were like, call me by my first name. I'm like, no, you earned that rank and I'm going to respect it.
So that right there has marketable value. And I you know, so a larger point, Gayle, as we you know near the end here, which makes me think of something that has also been a thing for me throughout my life, and it's exactly what I'm saying to him right now. You know, I think everybody has something that's in their brain, in their background, whatever it is. Everybody's got something that is of marketable value that other people will probably pay you for. And I think we've sort of identified with him one of several things that he's got that's marketable value that he can spin into something. And I think a lot of people maybe have trouble understanding what that thing is for themselves. And I think that's a really good thing as a takeaway to think about, you know, like, is there anything that I've got skill set wise that other people will pay for? As in another example, I have many family members that are bilingual, and they're bilingual because they were fortunate enough to grow up in a multicultural environment and a household. And so even if they know nothing else, let's say every other skill they had was stripped away, other than the ability to fluently speak two languages, that is a huge value. Like there are people like me who have worked their entire lives to learn other languages, and they're lucky enough to automatically speak a couple of languages. And I think a lot of people in that situation maybe even overlook that as a skill set. And that alone can be turned into a marketable value for you in your career or your business or whatever it is you want to do with it. So I think that everybody's got something. You just may not even realize that it's there or even ever think about it because it's so automatic for you, you know?
Yeah, the supervisor here, they say, hey, I want my contractor to become a federal employee. Can you help them out? And they've done that about 6 or 7 times now.
So you know what to do.
Yeah. Yep. Excellent. You know, it really is. That's an excellent point, because it's hard, especially for introverts. And I'm kind of introvert extrovert. I watch until I'm safe. But we find it very hard to price something that comes so easy to us. And we lose sight of the fact that it is a valuable thing and other people don't have it. So they want it, then they've got to have an energy exchange for it. Right? So don't be afraid to ask people, what is this worth to you? Right? In your market research. Like if go ahead.
I'll give you an example of somebody that I met about 15 years ago who's become a friend of mine that is a great example of somebody taking what I'm just saying and applying it. So I've been to Beijing probably 4 or 5 times. And when you go to Beijing, especially if you're going on a company expense account, normally I have a driver, I normally have a translator, and then on my off days, I had a guide I would hire. And this is a guy that speaks excellent English, and his full-time job is he's got very good search engine, dominance. Basically, he's like your guide. So you hire him for a couple $100 for the day. He does whatever you want. You want to go see various places, he knows places to go. You want to go to a tourist thing, he'll get you to the Great Wall. You need advice and help going to the good, to proper good restaurants, he'll go with you. And his life literally is just hanging out with people that come from the United States to Beijing, and they pay him, and they buy him lunch and dinner and stuff like that, because he speaks really good English and he happens to speak Chinese and he knows the. What a smart guy. What a great business. And every time I go to Beijing, I hire him. And it makes me more comfortable. I feel safer there because it's definitely really foreign if you're not used to it. And I thought, what a smart idea. And that's just taking the most basic thing and turning it into a business. And I think everybody, like I said, has got something that they can offer to be able to do something like that.
Ralph, I want to point out to you also what's at your fingertips as far as resources. For example, in the Success Engineers group, you've seen the name Lisa Hearing around here and there. Maybe. If not, you should soon.
Yeah, I'll look her up.
Okay. Well, my point in bringing her up is that she helps people transition out of the military and helping them get the most pension that they deserve, right? So she's already marketing to people who are transitioning out of the military. If you can create a strategic alliance with her, that I don't know, brainstorm, come up with a package together, or those people that are transitioning out of the military also get access to your resume writing service and maybe a copy of your book on how to be an unassuming leader in the civil sector, that type of thing. So there are strategic alliances that you can put together, and you've already got some really big power players that would be able to fuel what you're doing at your fingertips if you just reach out. Now, Didn't you do some amazing strategic alliances, Christopher?
Mm,
I might be thinking about a different interview.
no, I don't. I don't know. Maybe I don't think so.
Okay. Oh no, it was Jason Lane Curtis. It was one of the notes that I had for him, and we've rescheduled his Ask Me Anything for this next Monday. So wrong person, but stick around for that one, Ralph, because you'll want to know a lot about the strategic alliances that Jason's done. Any final words before, or final question before we head off into the sunset today?
Well, I really appreciate this opportunity. Gail, you're amazing. You provide so much inspiration for so many people, and it's a pleasure to be your friend. And I love seeing the stuff you do. So it's a real honor to be here. And I hope that what we've talked about provides some value for folks, and maybe a little inspiration. And if there's any parting thought, I would say just have courage. Don't be afraid to roll the dice, pursue your dreams. Um, the world has changed a lot in the last 9 or 10 months, and I think that if you're smart and can either change to roll with it or even capitalize on some of the things that are happening now, there's opportunity out there everywhere.
Thank you so much for that acknowledgement and for your friendship and for your support and being here, Christopher. I really enjoyed this. I hope Ralph did too. Um, I think that there's been tons of information that's going to make him very, very successful shared here. Thank you again.
My pleasure. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you
Thanks.
so much, Christopher.
My pleasure. Nice meeting you.
You too.
Bye, all.